All right, guys. So we have a very fun guest today, a living legend, as I like to say, Josh Kaufman of PersonalMBA.com, and well, a number of other projects which we're going to get into. But I was looking through some of Josh's material in the last few days and few months, and his work embodies so much of what we always talk about at Live Your Legend. This idea of self-guided education, that we can control and we need to be in control of how we learn and what we learn, especially with the tools online and all these other things. And what he did is, Josh has read thousands of books on business, economics, psychology, communication, math, science, systems theory, and he put those all together in a framework and kind of threw out the stuff that didn't work so well and found the stuff that really was fundamental and created this framework in what he calls the Personal MBA, and it's actually now a best-selling book, which has done obviously incredibly well. And he has a background at Procter & Gamble, which I always like to see when someone came from a corporation and now is doing something a little bit more unique. So his stuff's been in Business Week, Fast Company, Seth Godin's blog, all over the place. So Josh, it's very fun to have you here.
Thanks, Scott. It's nice to be with you. Thanks for the invitation.
Awesome. Well, yeah, let's dive right into it. A reader turned me on to your stuff not too long ago when I wrote the Self-Guided Education Manifesto, and I was kind of on a rant about how we have to learn things on our own and can't depend on other places. So I'm just curious, can you maybe tell us about this Personal MBA movement, just what spurred it, so we can get on the same page here?
Yeah, it's a funny story, actually. It started as very much a personal side project.
Yeah.
I had an opportunity to work at P&G in marketing, so doing product development and then selling those new products through to folks like Walmart and Target and Sam's, Costco, and all those wonderful folks. But everybody I was going to be working with had an MBA from a top 15 program. And, little old me just coming out of undergrad, at the time, that was very intimidating.
Right.
I felt that all of these folks had an understanding of business that I didn't have yet. Turned out not to be true, but that was my impression at the time.
Right.
So a lot of people are familiar with the famous quote from Good Will Hunting. You spent $150,000 on an education you could have got for $1.50 at the public library.
Yeah.
Long story short, I decided to take the $1.50 part literally. That's what I did. I went down to the library. I went to every Barnes and Noble in the greater Cincinnati area and just went to the business stacks and started reading. And I spent the initial part of the Personal MBA as a project was the months between graduating from undergrad and starting at P&G.
Mm-hmm.
So over those couple months, I read somewhere around 200 books in all sorts of different areas.
Wow.
Business and math and science and systems and anything that I could get my hands on that I thought would help me do better at my job. So that's how it started. And PersonalMBA.com came as a result of I was learning all of this really awesome stuff, and I figured it would be useful to just put it up online so other people who are interested in doing the same thing could learn from my experience and find the resources that were the most useful quickly instead of, you've been to the business section. There
Right.
are just thousands upon thousands of business books.
Yeah,
Something
it's
like
overwhelming.
like 11,000 business books published every year. And charitably, most of them are not so good.
Yeah.
So my goal with Personal MBA was to take all of the reading and research that I was doing and then put it into a form that other people could use to educate themselves about business.
Wow, what a project.
Yeah, super fun.
Yeah, I bet. I can imagine what's in your head right now. How were you able to sort through and assimilate that stuff? Were you constantly testing it out as you learned it, or what was your process for that?
Yeah, I actually, twofold. So when I was in college, I started my very first small company.
Okay.
My background is in programming, web design, web development. So I had a little side business going on where I would work with a small business that didn't have a website and try to put that online for them. Kind of embarrassingly bad when looking back on it, but that was my first real business.
Yeah.
And then going into P&G, particularly brand management and product development in P&G, I was kind of like being launched into one of the largest business systems that exists in the world right now.
Right.
So in a sense, it was interesting doing all of this reading and research because I had the experience of working with both the largest business systems in the world and the smallest business systems in the like right at the same time.
Right.
So it was fascinating. As I was learning, I was able to pick out, okay, these are the types of things that help me in a big company. These are the types of things that help me as an entrepreneur. And there's some overlap there. There are some things that you absolutely must know, whether you are a solo entrepreneur doing your own thing, or whether you're, for example, a CEO of a Fortune 50 company. The fundamentals of business really are fundamental.
Wow. So the fact that you were able to test the things out on both total extremes of the equation, I'm sure makes a huge difference in how practical that stuff was, and just to know what to leave out and what to keep in terms of your curriculum. So so I'm curious, when you started this, did you plan on it being a movement of sorts, or was it mainly just your own project and you?
Just me. It was just a guy reading a whole bunch of stuff.
As they seem to start.
Yeah. And it's really the most gratifying thing for me, because I've been doing the Personal MBA for 7-ish years now. Mm-hmm. And the most fun for me is to read the experiences of people who have found it and have been doing it and have found it useful, and to get those stories from people who are working at very large corporations and getting raises and moving up because of the things that they're learning. And also, from the folks who are just starting their own business and they finally found something that sells and they're really thrilled because they can do this thing on their own. So just getting the stories from both extremes has been very, very rewarding.
Yeah. Oh man, how practical that is. That's amazing. So the title, the Personal MBA, just begs the question, is this something that the idea is to replace an MBA or be a supplement? I mean, how does that work out?
Yeah, I think whether it's a replacement or a supplement really depends upon the individual. Mm-hmm. For the vast majority of people, there's actually a study that made a lot of waves a couple of years ago, which was spearheaded by Professor Jeffrey Pfeiffer, who is both a very well-known management professor and expert at Stanford Business School.
Okay.
The title of this particular study was "The End of Business Schools: Less Success Than Meets the Eye." And Dr. Pfeiffer collaborated with Dr. Christina Fong at the University of Washington and analyzed about 40 years worth of outcomes data from business schools, trying to answer the question, okay, people are spending a lot of money and a lot of time going to business school. What does it really get them when it all comes down to it? Right. And Dr. Pfeiffer and Dr. Fong's conclusion was a whole lot of nothing much. It does nothing. The most they could quantify is that for a very small, very narrow subset of people who either want to work at a big consulting firm or for a large investment bank, it's helpful in getting an interview basically right after college. Right. And aside from that, nothing. Doesn't help you get paid more money, doesn't help you move up any faster. And both the direct and the opportunity costs, if they're financed with debt, can be very, very destructive to a person's options in terms of the types of opportunities they can look for, the types of businesses they can start, the things they have to do just to service that loan.
Right.
So I would say if a person is dead set at working at Goldman Sachs or Bain Capital Management, then the Personal MBA is a really good supplement to going to business school so they could land an interview and actually know what they're doing in that job.
Right.
For 99.99% of the human population, the Personal MBA is a replacement for business school. You don't have to go to school to learn this stuff. It's actually much better for you to just spend a couple hours and learn the fundamentals, figure out what you're doing, and then spend the vast majority of your time and energy actually starting or working on the business you're trying to improve. That's
it. So practical application. Get to building as soon as you can.
Exactly.
And I have a lot of friends that have gone to business school, and actually a couple friends that are just finishing up at Harvard Business School, which I've always thought if I was going to go, that would be the place to go. That'd be a ton of fun. Right. And I was so excited to hear what people were building. I said, hey guys, so what kind of projects are people working on? They're like, Scott, to be honest, everyone's going back to banking and consulting. And it just,
Yep.
it crushed me. I thought of all the spots you'd think a place like that, it would have been different. But it's discouraging. And also, I get people coming to me all the time because I work with people a lot on, careers and what they should do next. And a lot of them will say, oh, I'm going to go back to school and then hope to maybe start something after that. And I think there's a big just misunderstanding about, I think, what people will get from a business school or even any higher education, and then what they actually get. I mean, what do you think is the difference between the assumptions and what's reality of what you get from a school like that?
I think what a lot of people are looking for when they start looking into things like business school, they're looking for permission. So they have an idea, they're not exactly sure what to do. They're a little bit hesitant or unsure about whether this is a good idea or not. And so business school becomes what seems to be a logical next step to qualify themselves before they launch into this unknown thing. And the reality is they're not going to be any more qualified to start this business after business school.
Right.
And I mean, you're going to learn something, but you're not going to learn all of the things that you need to know to actually work in a functioning business, unfortunately. In addition, what you will come out of business school with is a heck of a lot of debt.
Yeah.
And that debt is and it's so sad. I get emails about this. I get letters about it. It's that massive debt is really weighs people down. They have an idea, they want to start a business, but there is a non-negotiable $1,500 to $2,000 a month that they have to send to Sally Mae. And, they can't rent a small apartment and buy ramen noodles and keep lights on and work on this business thing. They have to work at a high-paying job for a large company that they probably don't even really like just to service the debt. Right. And that's the part about the whole business school thing that kills me. A lot of people consider it a cost of entry when it really isn't. You just need to learn the basics and know enough to get started. So that's my goal with the Personal MBA. I'm trying to help people learn all the basics, the things that they absolutely need to know. Just go out and start doing stuff, because that's where you're going to learn it.
Right, start shipping, as Seth Godin says, right? And I feel like there's another thing that comes along with it, whether it's an MBA or I see this with lawyers all the time. People go to law school, that you have this also entitlement or this expectation, like, I just invested 2 or 3 years of my life and my time. I have this education. I better use it the best I can, which means get the highest salary I can or do whatever it is. And even though it has nothing to do with their interests, their talents, their strengths, but they just feel like they owe it to themselves or something. Yeah,
and that's a very human thing. There's a concept in psychology called the sunk cost fallacy, which is, I've spent so much time doing this thing.
Right.
How can I throw that all away? How can I give that up? One of my good friends, Jonathan Fields.
Oh yeah. Well.
Super awesome guy. Yeah. Did the law school thing, super high-powered SEC attorney, gave it all up to become a private trainer and ended up opening his own gym. And when you talk to him now, the difference in his happiness and health in doing what he's doing now and his time as an SEC lawyer, it's night and day different. Yeah. But it was a hard decision because he had to give up a high salary, had to give up a lot of external prestige from others who thought it was really cool that he was an SEC attorney. It was really difficult, and I think that's a trap that a lot of people find themselves in. And it's really difficult, particularly when business school or law school is seen as a transitional, this is what I'm going to do until I have a better idea of what I'm going to do with my life kind of thing. As far as I'm concerned, far better to travel and figure that out on your own than load yourself up with 6 figures worth of debt.
It's always blown my mind that there's not a required minor in undergraduate on yourself. Of, go through what color is your parachute, or go through just some self-discovery and strengths finder and things like that. But I guess that's the point of what you've created. You've got to do it yourself until someone finds a way to convince the system to put it in there. I don't know if they will or not. But
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens, not just to graduate school, but to undergraduate I don't even want to call it education, undergraduate credentialing over the course of the next couple decades. Because all the things that we're saying about graduate school also apply to undergrad.
Right.
So there's certainly an element as people grow up and get more experience. There's a certain number of things about working with yourself, about working with other people, about what businesses are, about what people are and are not willing to pay for. Mm-hmm. There's a certain amount of things that you really honestly need to know about how the world works in order to expect to do well.
Right.
The means by which you learn those things does not have to be going and living close to a pretty campus for anywhere between 4 and 6 years and paying a lot of money for the privilege. So it'll be interesting. I think the higher credentialing industry is due for a bit of a shakeup. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of decades.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to see it already happening. I was just at a TED event in San Francisco. It was all about rethinking higher education, and they had everyone from the chief learning officer of Kaplan all over the place, all these different minds, and more or less they were bashing all the things we're talking about, higher education and how the system's broken. So the stuff you're doing, though, is what's changing it and for the better. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, I think I always think it's funny that when people talk back about their best experiences in college, it's never about the classrooms and it's never about anything that's actually directly related to the college.
Right.
It's having the freedom to travel and explore and do other things. So why pay a college rent?
Yeah, it's funny. My undergraduate, I studied business economics and accounting, and my other project, other than Live Your Legend, is I run an investment partnership modeled after Buffett's work when he was younger. And the funny thing is, I don't use any of the stuff I learned in college, and I studied accounting and economics and finance in our day-to-day work. We had to go back and learn it practically ourselves, which is, It blows my mind. So it just more reinforcement. But
totally.
So I'm curious, you talk about getting into it, starting, just building things, getting practical. So what role do you think entrepreneurship has in this whole thing compared to just working with someone else or a company early on? I mean, is it about doing your own thing, or what do you think?
I think there's a lot of value to both experiences. Mm-hmm. And I think both experiences can be had relatively easily by most people. So for example, I think, and this is actually one of the things that I didn't fully appreciate when I was going through the whole corporate job search idea. Working at P&G was very educational. I probably would have learned more if I had more responsibility and was working for a smaller company with more direct accountability, honestly.
I see.
So I think the idea of finding an industry or finding a company or a couple industries or a couple companies where you work for a smaller organization, you have a lot of responsibility, people are counting on you to deliver. That's a tremendously valuable experience, whether you stay in a more corporate environment or whether you ultimately go and start your own business.
Right.
In the same vein, if you work for a company, you can learn so much about business by starting up a little venture and spending some evenings or some weekends putting together a business system yourself and operating yourself. I really highly recommend that people, if they're able to, do both. You don't have to do both forever, but by doing both for a certain amount of time, you understand both how a business system is created and how it actually starts to function. And then you can go deeper on, by working for somebody else, you can go deeper on the parts of the system that you're particularly good at and you're particularly interested in.
Right. Yeah, it's a great point. And some of these micro businesses now online are so cheap to start.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a non-issue. It's like one night out to dinner to buy what you need. And Pam Slim calls it a side hustle, which I think is a great way of putting it.
It's a great term for it.
Yeah, start out like that. And usually the side hustle grows into a much bigger hustle if it's based on some passions, and it's either way it's learning. So well, cool. So I want to get into I guess, your newer or current project that's more dedicated to quick skill acquisition, I think, right? And I love that topic. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm actually working on my second book. Not a whole lot of details are public yet,
okay.
but the general idea is I'm super interested in going through the research about how people learn, and not necessarily learn academic subjects or memorize terms or whatever, but actually acquire skills that are useful in the real world. So take, for example, something like programming. There's a difference between knowing all the academic verbiage for what a program is and what it does, and being able to sit down in front of your computer and have an idea for a program and actually make the computer do that thing. And so skill acquisition is the idea of, if you want to learn programming in the sense of sitting down and writing a program that works, how do you go about learning a skill like that? How do you go about learning a language? How do you go about learning a physical skill? Like, so for example, if you want to be able to go to the golf course and hit a ball relatively straight, semi-consistently, like, how do you do that?
Easier said than done.
Easier said than done, and requires practice. And you know, the ever since Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers came out, this whole idea of deliberate practice. And the idea of the 10,000 hour rule. It takes 10,000 hours to become world class at something. Skill acquisition as a topic is becoming increasingly known. What most people don't realize, or where the 10,000 hours rule is extremely misleading, is that it deals with world class performance. So, you know, if you want to learn how to golf and you want to be the next Tiger Woods, probably going to take you about 10,000 hours to get to that point. But if you want to be able to pick up the skill and perform reasonably well, you're probably only talking about 10, 20, 30 hours. It's a lot easier than you think it is. Most people, when it comes to skill acquisition, have a lot of wishes. Like, I wish I could speak Spanish. I wish I could write I could create a iPhone application. I wish I could, film. What's missing for most people is being able to take that desire of something that you want to learn and actually translate that into a plan to help them actually learn it quickly. Setting aside the time, creating a schedule, getting the tools, doing all the things that have to be done in order to actually start practicing. And when people actually do that and start practicing, it doesn't take very long to be reasonably good. So that's the next research topic. It's how do you learn something new and as quickly as you possibly can to a certain level of quality.
That's such a huge distinction, the fact that you can do something well enough to, who knows, make some money from it or be happy doing it or whatever it is a lot quicker, and that's going to be fun. I imagine you're extremely talented now in a lot of different things, right?
You know, it's fun. Part of this project, which is why I'm really excited about it, is the first probably quarter of the book is digging into the research to see what science says about skill acquisition. How do we really learn what works, what contributes to speed and quality of skill acquisition? The back half of the book is me actually field testing everything that I'm learning.
Very cool.
So I have 7 skills that I am working on, completely unrelated topics, things that I have never done before.
Nice.
And I'm giving myself a month to go from 0 to however good I can get. And so far, so good.
Oh, I love it. I cannot wait to open that book up. That's got to be so fun to create.
It's a super fun project. I'm having a good time with it.
Wow. Well, this has been a blast. I don't want to take too much more time. Maybe we could just kind of close things out, though, with if people listening are at that stage where they're thinking, okay, what's next? And they had been thinking about maybe going to school, trying to figure out that way, or they want to learn something specific. Is it go straight to your tools and do the personal MBA, or is there a process you suggest they think through and conceptualize before they take the next step?
Yeah, I think the general guidance is, and this applies to far beyond business. The general idea is in any particular topic or for any particular skill, there's only a very small set of concepts or techniques or tools or resources that you really need in order to get most of the value from your time. And I call in the Personal MBA, I call this mental models. So there's for any topic, any skill, there's a very small set of mental models that you need. Instead of going to school, which may or may not be appropriate later, focus on finding those mental models first.
Okay.
Focus on finding the core things first and learn those. Once you learn those, you'll be in a much better position to look at all of the other things that are out there and decide what's going to be most valuable or beneficial for you to spend time on later.
Right.
So in terms of business, the book that I wrote, Personal MBA, is designed to be that one resource that contains all of the core mental models you need to understand in order to figure out what to do next. Those types of resources exist in pretty much every discipline. You just have to take the time and go look for them, basically. But that's my guidance. Look for those first, learn them first, and then go out and explore where you need to after that.
I like that advice a lot because it forces you to think about what matters most before you dive into some general thing like going to a school or something like that. So
yeah,
it's I guess what's that?
Yeah, like with business, a lot of people get a general idea. It's like, I have to learn how to read all of these crazy complex financial statements.
Right.
No, you don't. Frankly, you don't even need to know what a debit and a credit are, as long as you understand what a business is, how it works, the main parts. And then a lot of the other stuff just becomes common sense once you understand the core principle.
Right.
But yeah, I think a lot of folks, particularly if they don't have a lot of experience in what they want to learn about, jump straight into how can somebody else give me some structure? So like, how can I go to school? How can I have some, pay somebody a lot of money to tell me what to do?
Right. That's the easy route.
That's the easy route. And the very expensive route. The best thing that you could do is try to educate yourself first and find the mental models first, and then start investigating other options if you feel that you still need it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. So it sounds very 80-20, maybe 90-10.
Hopefully 99-1.
Yeah, there you go. Well, hopefully everyone watching can go check out Personal MBA, your book, and your site, because I think that's where it starts, and it gives such a good framework. So, Josh, thanks for building what you're building. Thanks for being on here with us. It's an inspiration. It's a blast.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invitation, and looking forward to seeing what you build over the months and years ahead.
Oh, it'll be fun. All right. Thanks.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.